Reading rang my mum, like there was people like that wanted to have a look, but I was just like, I can't just keep travelling up and down the country for either me not to be like, for my face not to fit, or for them to say that they don't think that I'm good enough. So obviously one of my first days in with Southend was obviously come and met you and sat down with you and my mum, and I think after a session you basically outlined that what you thought I should have improved and that kind of thing. You probably remember that discussion better than I will. I was probably a bit of a rabbit in the headlights that day. But no, I really enjoyed my time, and I was also like, as you probably remember, I was chucked in the deep end like early with training with Lee Turner, and Lee Turner wanted to look at me, so obviously I had to train with the first team goalkeepers, and again it was like a real good education to something I'd never been exposed to before. So obviously I'd only ever played with like academy players, and I'd only ever been like in contact with players my own age. So to go in and get chucked in with the likes of Steve Mildenhall, Ian Joyce and Clark Masters, who at the time were all like, fully grown men, and there's me like a 15-year-old boy, and I really was like a wiry boy.
Really late developer, weren't you?
Yeah.
Physically really late.
Yeah, so that was like real eye-opener for me. And then obviously the relationship that you and I had for like 8 years at Southend, and the progress I had to make, especially for the first 3 years, in such a short space of time, was like vital to my career. Because I wasn't, you'll probably remember more than me, I wasn't ready for youth team football, never mind first team football. I wasn't ready to come through. I didn't understand what it took to be a scholar. I was like mentally weak, I was physically weak, like I was like a real rabbit in the headlights. But like, you probably got better memory of that of me, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously remember you first coming in and sitting down with you and your mum at Boots and Laces, which isn't the most glamorous of training grounds. I don't know, I think the first thing that stuck out with you was physically, you looked like you had so much potential, but you looked like a really late developer. And you did look very sort of naive. I could tell you didn't really have an idea of what the whole scholarship system was or anything along those lines. But I remember that meeting. I remember it really clearly. My memory isn't great, but I remember sitting down with you and your mum and saying to you, look, it was a bit cheesy at the time, but I said, look, training grounds don't make players, people do.
Yeah, I remember that.
In hindsight, that was the right thing to say, because it's probably exactly the reason why you were so successful at Southend.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't a training ground.
No, I mean, it's funny, isn't it? Because, if anyone who's been to Boots and Laces, the changing rooms, the ceilings leak when it rains, the showers are either boiling hot or freezing cold.
Usually cold.
Yeah, but actually, usually cold. But I think that, and we'll come on to this in a bit, I think that definitely helps sort of nurture that mentality that, nothing's going to be given to you. Everything you're going to get, you're going to have to earn, and you're going to have to do it the hard way. It's almost a little bit like the old Rocky IV movie, isn't it? When you go to Boots and Laces, it's tough. And obviously now you're playing week in, week out in the Championship at Bristol's training ground. You kind of appreciate that even more now, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, like, obviously coming through from having Arsenal, which was obviously like, training ground was perfect, grass was perfect, changing rooms were spotless every day, going into kind of a temporarily painted changing room that's got drips coming through the ceiling, usually fairly unhygienic, I think is probably a polite way of putting it. Like that for me is a great education. And I definitely wouldn't change that for anything, because I'm glad that I came through that, and everything I get now, like I was washing my own kit at Southend, I was, turning up every day, everything was done, I was washing my own boots, and that's like, people say, well, you should be. Well, yeah, I know I should be, but like, a lot of people have it better than that. A lot of people get their boots done by the kit man, they have their kit washed, they have their kit laid out, they have everything done for them. But it was a really good education for me to become a man, where I had to do all those things myself and take responsibility of what I was doing. And that helps me, because obviously when I was 16, I was on the bench in League One for Southend 20 times, which again, rabbit in the headlights, and I was nowhere near ready to play at that stage. But obviously I was on the coach to away games with the first team, I was in the changing rooms, I was spending time with like I say, Steve Mildenhall and people like that, Lee Turner and the rest of the pros. And obviously I was only a complete baby at the time, but coming through, it taught me what it was to become a pro, and to become a scholar first and foremost. But then I knew that I had to improve so much to become a pro and take that next step.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, obviously now being at Bristol and before that at Brentford, do you think that looking at the scholar players now and the young academy players, do you think they might miss out on that kind of tough upbringing that you had at Southend? And I know it's easy to kind of say, you know, everything's done for them, but do you think there's something in, you know, doing it the way you did it, which is really the hard way, you know, being at a club like Southend, although it's, you know, it's a great club, you know, it's a tough environment, and sometimes, you know, it's sort of been said that the academy system now, you know, you've got to try and prepare people and young players for this really tough sport and really tough game. But, you know, are the facilities, they're getting everything handed to them on a plate? You know, this isn't my opinion, this is what people are saying. You know, it doesn't really mentally prepare them for the game. Is that something you're seeing or not?
Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of 18s and 23s football. And compared to when I was a kid, and probably even more so compared to like when you were a scholar back in the day, you know, if you did something that, you know, was disrespectful towards the pros, you know, you were going to get a little slap. Do you know what I mean? You were going to get slapped about and punished in one way or another, whether they took your clothes and put them all in the showers, or cut your laces out your shoes. You know, all those little things. They were all, it was all education, and you know, I know obviously times have evolved and you can't do some of the stuff that those players used to do, and there's protection in place to stop that happening. But at the same time, I do think there is certainly a place for kids to learn off pros that have been there and done that. And I think that education-wise, I don't regret my education at all, and I do think I am still a little bit old school because I had that education. And when I speak to, obviously, like, when I was at Southend, I used to speak to like the likes of James McCree and Josh Beckson and stuff like that. And then, you know, similar to the young lads at Brentford, and then we've got a couple of lads here at Bristol City, Lockie Robinson, Harvey Wiles-Richards and Aaron Sainsbury, Will Boost, are all kind of learning their trade. You know, I want them to kind of know the harsh reality of men's football. And some of them have gone out and got that on loan and stuff, but you know, it's different going on loan to a non-league club to then playing in front of, you know, up to, you know, 30 or 1,000 championship every week, and training with the pros every day. You know, when you train with the pros, a level is expected of you that if you drop below, the pros are going to tell you, whether you're 15, 18 or 35. You know, if you drop below that standard expected, you're soon going to know about it when you've got pros, senior pros especially, that, you know, in a small-sided game, their team's just conceded 3 and the keeper's chucked in 2 of them. You know, you're going to get a mouthful of abuse, because in the moment people care about their team winning or losing.
So you played a lot of games at Southend at a young age. You broke into the first team, would you say 19?
Yeah, I think it was 19, 20? Yeah.
So what traits did you need in order to go in and play in League Two at such a young age? Because it is a very physical league. It's a very, very tough league to be effective in.
Yeah.
What did you need? And I mean, I obviously know the answer because we work together every day, but I think it's important that you get that point across. Yeah.
I think so much was my mental well-being, really, and the way I could control my mind. Because you probably remember, I used to get like so angry when I'd concede or make a mistake. You know, like my head would be gone for like a couple of minutes. Yeah, I agree, Whitey. Good protection in front. Yeah, like my head would be gone for like a couple of minutes that I'd made a mistake or conceded. And you know, when you're playing in front of a crowd, especially in a first team game, you can't afford that couple of minutes of lapse of concentration. You know, you need to be solid from minute 1 to minute 90 and some. So definitely being prepared mentally was something that you and I obviously spent hours and hours on, whether it be on the phone, in meetings, on the training ground. And I remember once we were on pre-season in Spain in the Spanish football academy camp, and I was awful in training. I had an absolute beast, and it was about 30 degrees. Honestly, you probably remember. I don't know if you remember this or not. And there's a picture of it online somewhere that I've got. And I was awful in training. And you were raging with me after training that I'd been so bad, and obviously you obviously expected a certain standard of me, and I was awful that day. I remember you said to me, right, I'm going to take. You said I'm going to take 8 shots from outside the box. If I score more than 2, we're going to carry on until you save, until you concede less than 2. And I remember making so many mistakes, and then you got to the point where you was like, right, if the ball comes into you and you don't catch it cleanly, or you don't make a decision to catch or deflect at the right time and get it in a good area, I'm going to start again. And I think we spent about an hour and a half extra after training, like at 5 o'clock in 30-degree heat in Spain,